So, it's just been confirmed that Bethesda's upcoming RPG Starfield will have a silent protagonist. That's a move back to the design choice we see in Elder Scrolls and Fallout 3. Fallout 4 marked a sort of experiment for Bethesda, where for the first time they tried implementing a voice protagonist into their signature open-world games. That was a divisive move, and it left many fans feeling disappointed. Not everyone will agree that the voice protagonist detracted from the game, and if that's your opinion, you probably won't agree with the rest of this video either. And that's okay. How you feel about things like a silent protagonist is a deeply subjective thing, based entirely on your own experience with the game.
Well, that's just like your opinion, man.
The enduring popularity of Skyrim, Fallout 3, and the popularity of modding the main character's voice out of Fallout 4 are proof that a silent protagonist can work extremely well in certain cases. So I want to talk a bit about why that is. Why does a silent protagonist work so well, specifically for Bethesda games, and why was the addition of a voiced character in Fallout 4 so divisive amongst fans? I think there are two main reasons why a silent protagonist works so well in Bethesda's RPGs. The first reason is fairly straightforward. A silent protagonist can act as a self-insert for the player, and the second reason is that a silent protagonist doesn't cause a disconnect between a deeply customizable character experience and voice lines that always remain the same. I'm not going to spend much time considering self-insertion because I think it's easy to grasp. The silence of the character is a blank slate that allows for a player to insert themselves, thereby having a more connected and immersive experience. It lets the player feel like they are in the world and seeing it themselves, rather than experiencing it through the eyes of another. The character doesn't react to events, and instead the player is left to fill in that void with their own experience. Personally, self-insertion is not why I enjoy the silent protagonist in these types of games. It's the deep level of customization available in Bethesda RPGs that makes the silent protagonist work effectively. I'm not talking about just the ability to customize the way your character looks, but also their entire build, the tools they use, the armor they wear, the people they speak to, the people they kill, the narrative and stories they experience or don't experience. A wizard playing through the Dawnguard and Mages Guild quests will be a very different character to a brawny warrior playing through the Companions or a sneaky assassin playing through the Thieves Guild and the Dark Brotherhood. There's an almost unparalleled level of control over your character in Bethesda RPGs, and when you add voice dialogue to the protagonist, you're presented with a problem. The voice acting has to suit the character that the player has created, and when the player has many radically different characters over multiple playthroughs, this becomes almost impossible and voice dialogue for the protagonist fails to work. A single voice can't effectively represent multiple different characters. Because of this, assigning voiced lines to the protagonist takes away from your ability to customize. All your characters end up feeling like they're the same person, and that can cause a huge disconnect between the character you've painstakingly built and the character you hear delivering lines. And I'm not necessarily trying to imply that players have a conscious idea of how their character should sound. It's just that when you introduce a voice that doesn't work, it's a very jarring experience. Consciously thinking about a character voice and other RP elements are not really things that I do, and yet I still found it annoying that my grenade-tossing, civilian-killing maniac character in Fallout 4 nearly always sounded the exact same as my good guy gunslinger. I just never felt like I was playing different characters, despite the really different builds and appearances. This killed my desire to replay the game, because it never felt like I was playing a truly different character. And that's a problem I've never had with any of Bethesda's other open-world RPGs. Creating different characters adds replay value, and having the same voice ruins the ability to create truly different characters. The player's own customized characters are extremely important and critical for the silent protagonist to work well. When you afford the player a massive amount of freedom and customization, you simply can't create voiced lines that will match the different characters. If the voice doesn't match the player's expectation, then you're in effect imposing a restriction on that customization. The restriction being that every character has to sound the same. For those of us that really enjoy customization, that's a pretty enormous restriction. And even if you added multiple voice actors, it's unlikely that you would always find an acceptable voice and delivery of lines. so a silent protagonist becomes the favoured design choice. But customization in Bethesda RPGs isn't limited to just character creation. The entire narrative of the game is customizable, other than the very beginning. You don't have to do any of the main quests. You can pick and choose story arcs to follow, or to abandon, and you're free to do them in any order. Such a massive amount of freedom poses a difficulty for a voiced protagonist. Predefined lines can't account for the huge amount of different narrative scenarios that emerge. That's why voiced protagonists work so well in games with a tight narrative, like The Witcher 3, where you play a defined character with a clear path through the game. Whilst you can make choices and build differently, ultimately you're playing a version of the same character within a tightly controlled story, and all the voiced dialogue is appropriate for that story. The same can't be said for Bethesda's open-world RPGs. This is why I loved Geralt in the Witcher games, but came to dislike the protagonist of Fallout 4. Geralt is a predefined character, and no matter how you customize him, he's still Geralt of Rivia, a Witcher, and every player playing the game is playing a version of Geralt. Slightly different versions maybe, but still the same character, and all his lines make sense and are delivered well. This is where games like Skyrim differ. Only you are playing the mad wood elf archer you created. Only you are playing the cunning necromancer you created. Only you are playing the dual-wielding berserker murdering traders on the road. The game devs and writers have no idea the character you are going to play. These are all personal creations that follow a changing narrative based on your choices. You drive the experience of the characters you create in the Elder Scrolls series. They might not even become the Dragonborn. They might never set foot in Riverwood or Whiterun. These types of games are too open-ended for a voiced protagonist to be effective. The player has far too much control over every aspect of the character for a set delivery of lines. Writers simply cannot craft lines that work for all the different characters and the different narrative experiences they will have, whereas silent dialogue allows for your own interpretation. That's another reason why Fallout 4 having a voiced protagonist was such a turn-off for many people. No matter the different steps you took, it was just the same character delivering the same lines. Having a silent protagonist solves this problem for many people, and allows for players to interpret the delivery of lines based on the character they are currently playing. So that's basically why I think a silent protagonist is the best choice for Bethesda RPGs. Of course, there are other reasons for preferring a silent protagonist. Relying on player interpretation of dialogue makes it hard to screw up a silent protagonist, but it's very easy to screw up a voiced protagonist if they're poorly written. And also, I do think there's an argument that simply giving the player the choice of turning off voiced lines could work, and that might be the best of both worlds. Of course, only a developer can decide whether the resource cost would be worth it. So all in all, I'm very pleased that Bethesda has announced a silent protagonist for Starfield. I think that the level of customization, both in creating a character and how you experience the story, makes the silent protagonist the best design choice for the game, and I hope they continue with silent protagonists going forward into Elder Scrolls 6 and Fallout 5. If you're still listening at this point, I hope you enjoyed the video. It's my first. Please drop a like and subscribe.